I'm Autumn Lockett,
And this is Mitch Randall.
and you're listening to Good Faith Weekly.
On this episode of Good Faith Weekly, we're going to take a deeper dive later on in the segment to talk about the importance of Sabbathing. Are we taking a great pause during this pandemic? Jessica McDougall from Millwood Baptist Church in Raleigh, North Carolina, wrote a fabulous article at ethicsdaily.com this week. And then in our interview, we're going to be talking to Rabbi Bob Alper, discussing the importance of laughter during crisis. So Autumn, how you doing this week? Everybody healthy and wealthy and wise over there at your house?
Well, none of us are sick, and that's really the benchmark that we're counting as success at our house.
Now, to be honest with the audience, if you're like me, every time I get a little sniffle, every time I get a little, I am racing for the thermometer to see if I have a temperature. And thank God I haven't developed that.
I think, I think it's just this crazy allergy time right now too. So you're like, every sneeze, your ears perk up and your head tilts to the side. Like, is that a something? But no, so far it's not. And I was joking earlier this week about, 4 children, and the youngest 3 are 7 and under. And so my 13-year-old isn't really counted in this next part of the story because I don't kiss her forehead every morning. We're just not really at that point of our relationship anymore.
Yeah, got it.
Yep, but with my 3 little ones, I sort of use my good morning forehead kiss to gauge whether or not they feel warm or not, because a mama knows if their baby has a fever.
Sure.
But so far, everybody's just cool as a cucumber, and they're happy to be home.
Outstanding. Well, good. Well,
how are y'all doing?
We've been doing well. I mean, a little bit of paranoia has set in. Mm-hmm. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, there may be somebody in the house who will go unnamed who, if they get a hangnail, it's like, I got the COVID. It's like, I don't think that's a symptom, but I get your frightened state, I guess. So, but no, we're doing well. I'll also be honest with you. I mean, the walls are closing in a little bit after over a week now of staying sheltered in the home. But it's good. I mean, it's good. We're finding a new normal.
Yeah, and you mentioned sort of the walls feeling like they're closing in. We were talking the other day about the way that our homes have sort of transformed. It used to be a place that we, came home to at 5:30 in the evening, and we're sort of here till we got out the door about 12 hours later. But now it truly has transformed into our safe place from the outside world. And, I'm just infinitely thankful that I have a place that I can be safe and sheltered away, and we're living a lifestyle that enables me to just hunker down and stay in it. But what we have found is that we're using our house in different ways. And there are some places that have multi-functions. And so the question that I'm posing you today, Mitch, is what used to be your favorite room in your house, and what is now your favorite room in your house, and why?
Up to this point, and there's a lot of, it's a kind of a loaded question from my end, because there was a period in time in our lives where the kids were here, lots of things going on in the house, a lot of activity, probably similar to your house.
Yeah.
But when the boys went off to college, it became really quiet. And so Missy and I were here, empty nesters, for all of 4 months. But we leaned into that, and we began to enjoy the quietness of our house. And so, what we have discovered during this shelter in place order that we're living under now is that you're right. These rooms are becoming repurposed. And so now our guest bedroom is where our youngest is living and attending class. Our upstairs bonus room is where our oldest is now living. In fact, our upstairs bonus room is where you and I used to record.
I know. Cole stole our pod loft.
He did. He stole our pod loft. But he's up there now and living and attending class up there virtually, obviously. But really, there's 2 rooms that we kind of repurposed. One is part of our garage here of our house. Because we can no longer go to the gym, we can't get out and exercise through running and walking. but Tanner and I kind of like to lift weights every now and again. So we have a weight bench, and we got some weights and got a weight bar, and so kind of turned our part of our garage into a gym. So he and I have been going out there in the mornings and in the evenings sometimes and lifting weights and talking. And so that's been really enjoyable to kind of reconnect with him on a different plane, I guess, from our usual norm. And then what's been fascinating too has just been dinner time. We haven't gathered around the table in a long time because everybody's been living in separate spaces and then or watching some television at night in the living room. These rooms that were a bit quiet, which again, Missy and I enjoyed the quietness as empty nesters, have been filled with life. And it's a beautiful thing to see. I mean, we hate that the circumstances that brought us to this, but if you're going to be shut up in a house for an extended time, it's nice to be able to talk and to communicate and to enjoy your spaces where you live.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree with that, and feel like the dinner table has become a really special place. We eat dinner together most nights, but until he lost his job recently, my husband hadn't been home for dinner in a few months on a regular basis. And so we've really carved out that time where, I mean, definitely there are times when we would rather sit in front of the TV and watch an old episode of Andy Griffith during dinner. And Lord knows we've seen enough of each other's faces by dinner time, but we've really tried to hold that space and sit at dinner and talk to one another and pose these questions and things like that. And so I agree that the dining room has sort of become the place where we rejuvenate and not just fill our stomachs, but also kind of fill our souls a little bit with each other and with conversation. And my old favorite place in our house was our kitchen, because I love to cook.
Right.
And it still is. That is my solace. That is where I go to kind of center myself, and I still love that. But our son's room has become my office. Sure. Because it's quiet enough. I mean, you're going to
hear Bat Cave at Good Faith Media.
That's right. It is the Bat Cave. In fact, usually you can see in the background his Gotham toys. But it's the quietest place in our house where I can get away, and our 2-year-old doesn't know that I'm here. So we just tell her that I'm leaving, and she's not banging on the door wanting to talk to mama. So I've never spent as much time in this room as I have now, but it's great. It has a window, and I think that natural light really does a lot for my mood, which I'm trying to stay kind of tapped into. Something that you said earlier kind of resonated too. I've been talking with some of my friends about the fact that you can be both things. Like, you can be sad that this is the situation and worried about what it means for our future, but also be thankful for the moment and make the best of it.
Yeah. And that's what we're going to do in the deeper dive here in a moment. We're going to talk about, has this pandemic forced us to take a great pause? Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly. And in this week's deeper dive, we're going to talk about an article that was posted on April 2nd by Jessica McDougall from Raleigh, North Carolina at ethicsdaily.com, entitled, "Does Coronavirus Give You Chance to Take What She Calls the Great Pause?" And the article is absolutely fascinating because it talks about the importance of the Sabbath in the Bible and our struggle as a people of faith taking the Sabbath when things are normal. And she poses the question, has this pandemic forced us to take the great pause or to take Sabbath more seriously? What do you think, Autumn?
Yeah, and I think it is definitely forced, and it feels forced. But I think leaning into it instead of trying to pull away is something that I've learned to do. You mentioned that you guys are in week 1. We're in week 3 of hunkering down. I have an underlying heart condition, and so we're just having to be super, super careful.
Sure.
And it feels, it definitely feels forced, but I find myself wondering, like, when was the last time we truly had Sabbath? Because, as a mom with young children, Sunday doesn't feel very restful.
Right.
By the time we get up and we get everyone ready for church, some of our children have met the Lord a few times before we could make it 5:35. And then,
Jesus showed up and, hey, we're come to meet Jesus time. Is that
absolutely, grab somebody by a shirt collar. Not really. We don't encourage violence. But you get home from church and you have to like rush and get people fed before it's time for naps, and then then we have to FaceTime with grandparents, and by the time we look up, it's Monday. And I feel the rest that has come from this forced Sabbath for sure.
One of the things that situations like this began to force us to reflect upon is the busyness of our life. And I'm not talking about necessarily just work and school and the day-to-day activities it takes to get by as family, but all the other things that we involve ourselves in that we don't know are taking more time than we could ever think about. I remember back when some of the professional sports went on strike, and it was kind of a gamble on their part because they went on strike, and then all of a sudden, a month or two later, you're like, I can live without this. I don't have to have it. Do I miss it? Do I enjoy it? Yeah, but I don't have to have it. The world goes around. And I'm wondering if that's the case that many people are finding even today. It seems like we are obsessed with being busy.
Yeah.
And has this forced pause really enlightened us to think about some of those things that we could probably give up when this pandemic is over with?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people questioning how much of my old normal do I want to let back?
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, that, just because you used to do it and it used to be your normal pattern doesn't need to be what continues. And this really allows all of us, not just a Sabbath, but a reset for things going in the future that may help us to intentionally hold a space for a true Sabbath in our regular lives, should they continue. Right. Ever.
Yeah, exactly. So Autumn, you're a mother of 4 and a spouse of 1. Obviously, lots of activity in your house. So let me ask you this. How do you personally find Sabbath during this time?
I think that's a great question. And I'm not just saying this because you're my boss, but I am so thankful to have a career, a life path now, that I wake up every morning knowing that I'm doing something that is really important to me, and that it, fuels the beating of my heart, and it's something I want to wake up and do and do good with you guys and with everyone kind of in our constituency. So, work sort of feels like Sabbath to me. That has not always been the case. And so I'm really, really thankful for that. I'm still kind of in that honeymoon period, maybe. I don't have a dartboard with your face on it yet. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
This will help make me one eventually, I know. And then, I think we talked about it earlier, but it's just in the kitchen. I really try to strategize weekend meals, especially that are a little more involved. Things like homemade bread, from scratch pasta, things that take time. Some foods can't be rushed. And so I think there's something really, something just really, you can really learn from that sometimes.
Yeah. Well, good. Well,
what about you?
Well, I've taken up running again. So in the mornings, I'll go out for a quick run, and it's just me by myself. And I've noticed that with everybody indoors now, there's not a lot of runners or walkers early in the morning. So a lot of times it's just me. And I'm able to just breathe and be by myself and offer some prayers and talk to God and just really exist outside of the chaos of the world right now. And so that's really been helpful. I told you a moment ago earlier in the episode that my son and I put together a little gym out in our garage, and that's been an escape for me as well. But then also I've rearranged my schedule. And I know that parents of young children have have a more difficult time doing this. But in the morning before I really start my work day, I really take time to read a couple of chapters of a book. I've always loved to read and always been an avid reader, but just really kind of enjoying reading for pleasure now. When you're a minister, when you're in the professional world, or you're working and taking care of family and stuff like that, Sometimes reading for pleasure gets pushed aside. Just really trying to connect with a good story these days.
Are you looking for a new way to grow your faith? Nurturing Faith is offering 5 of their best-selling devotionals for only $12 for Good Faith Weekly listeners. Go to nurturingfaith.net to find hope from Carol Bozeman Taylor, John R. Roebuck, Blake McKinney, Michael L. Ruffin, and Merrill J. Davies. The books are all available in the bookstore section of the Nurturing Faith website. And now, back to Mitch and Autumn.
Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly. And this week in our interview segment, we are very fortunate to have Rabbi Bob Alper from East Dorset, Vermont. Rabbi Alper has served congregations in Buffalo and Philadelphia. And more recently, he is serving the world congregation through his humor. He is a comedian. Rabbi Alper, it's great to have you.
That habit's going to be hard to break, Mitch.
It is. That's exactly right. So it's great to have you today. Welcome.
Thank you. You can say revered rabbi.
Oh,
Yeah, I like that.
I like that. Yeah. Well, welcome to the show. So our first question for you, you mentioned as we were chatting before we started recording today, you mentioned that you fell into comedy. So how does a distinguished rabbi get into such a seedy underbelly kind of world?
Wow.
First of all, it was when I was a kid, when I was little, the word we used to use for our rear end was not fanny or butt. We called it a tutu.
Okay.
A tutu. So I have no, maybe our family word, but I can recall a babysitter came to the house. She said, "Does anyone want to go to the park?" And one kid said, "I want to go." And my sister said, "I want to go too." And I can remember saying, "I want to go too." And, people might not think that's so hysterical, but I remember thinking in that very moment, I am one funny toddler.
You've been honing your craft since a young age, right?
Exactly. So I was always funny. I said that I always use jokes and funny stories in my sermons in front of my congregations, which has given me over 47 years experience performing in front of a hostile audience.
No doubt.
And the turning point actually came in 1986. I had served as an assistant rabbi in a huge congregation in Buffalo for 6 years. Then I had my own 400 family congregation in Philadelphia for 8 years. Then I left. I had earned a doctorate. I decided I wanted to do counseling, officiated life cycle events. And that summer, I saw this little notice in the Jewish Weekly in Philadelphia. "Do you think you're funny? If so, sign up for the Jewish Comic of the Year contest." So I did. I had to send
Comic of the Year.
Jewish Comic of the Year contest. I signed up. There were 100 people who applied. There were 13 finalists. We had to do 5 minutes at a comedy club in Philadelphia. And I came in third behind a chiropractor and a lawyer.
That sounds like a joke in itself.
That's right. That's right. But one of the judges was the hostess of the top-rated local TV morning talk show, AM Philadelphia. She thought I should have won. And so she had me on her show. And she was right, by the way. She had me on her show. Well, because the lawyer went long and the chiropractor was dirty. I mean, come on.
All right, there you go.
Yeah. But she had me on her show. And that started it. And within 2 or 3 years, I was doing a lot of shows. And,
Wow.
It's been wonderful. I mean, it's a dream come true. I still can't believe that I'm a stand-up comic, which I just adore doing it. If getting up in front of an audience and making people laugh, or making one person laugh in the produce aisle, it's immediate gratification. You can't fake laughter. You can say, "Oh, I'm really interested in your story." Well, yeah, maybe you might not. You might or you might not be. But you can't fake laughter. And if you can make somebody laugh, you're doing what we Jews call a mitzvah. You're doing a good deed. You're giving them something, and it's immediate, and the feedback is immediate. And,
Right.
I
So, Bob, I mean, compare and kind of contrast for our audience. I mean, there's congregational ministry. It's a day-to-day, week-to-week. A ministry that you're relating to people. You're in their lives, and many times very intimate moments in their lives. And now your ministry of comedy to audiences around the country. Relate the two for us. I mean, what's the big difference?
It's just scale. It's pretty much the same. It's in congregational life, it's often one-on-one, or it could be a high holy sermon in front of 800 people. But you're relating to people. They're helping them through crises, individual events in their lives. Comedy is you're relating to people in a different way. It's not quite as intimate because I don't know their backgrounds, what they're going through. But I do know that when I make people laugh, it's helpful. And there's a holiness to laughter, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just diversion. There's a holiness to it. And I've had 3 occasions after I've done a show in front of a couple hundred people where a woman's come up to me and said, she said, my husband died 6 months ago, and tonight was the first time I've laughed.
Wow.
So, to have the honor of being able to serve in a role where you can touch people, strangers, as it were, in such a positive way, it's a gift that I absolutely treasure.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, what a great story. I mean, laughter is certainly a balm for all of us who have scars and wounds. And so thank you for doing that. I caught some of your act online at bobappler.com, which we encourage all of our listeners to go to right after they finish listening to the pod. But I mean, you're hilarious. It's some great material there.
Thank you.
I noticed that some of your jokes, poke fun at faith, which is always a good thing. Have you ever gotten any pushback? Anybody said, "Hey, Rabbi, you gone too far"?
Only my wife.
Amen. Know anything about that, do you?
Yes. When we were married, my late uncle was one of the officiants. And he said to her, and not thinking I'd ever be a comedian, but he said something very wise. He said to Sherry, "You will be a gentle critic." And, we've been married for 50 years, and I prize that she is a gentle critic. And I try things out on her, and if I've gone too far, she will let me know. Often, though, I'll do a joke, and she'll just say, yeah. And then I'll say, I'm going to make that one work. Mm-hmm. And often I do. But hang on. I'm getting a beep. I'm going to just try and stop it from beeping. In terms of my material, no, I don't go too far. For example, I don't do jokes about circumcision.
Right.
Circumcision, that's an easy joke.
Sure.
It's a cheap joke. It's what comedians call a dick joke.
Mm-hmm.
Dick jokes always get laughs because they're really easy.
Right.
But circumcision, it's a sacred ceremony.
Sure.
So I don't do that, but I will do jokes about Jews behaving in silly ways.
Sure.
For example, I talk about my favorite personals ad in the Florida papers. They have Jewish people put in these personals ads. And my favorite one is a single Jewish woman seeks single Jewish man with dead mother. So I'm trying to shut this phone off. I'll talk about wedding ceremonies, about a nervous groom. I said, "Phil, would you please face Nancy and recite the vows?" He said, A-E-I-O-U. I do a thing. I haven't done this in the act lately, but I probably should put it in the act. It's an old joke I haven't used in a while. But anyway, story about came across a couple of members of my congregation, 2 very important men, walking into the Board of Trustees meeting. And as I walked up to them and behind them, I heard one say to the other, "I'm not sure which way I'm going to vote on the issue, but I'm prepared to be bitter."
There you go.
Man, you're talking about Baptist, aren't you?
Right.
Speaking of Baptist, you were just, before this pandemic, you were touring the Laugh and Peace Tour, and you were touring with a Baptist pastor and a Muslim. So how does that work?
You know, that's one of my favorite things in my life. First of all, because I really love Susan Sparks, who is the minister that I work with, and Gibran Salim, who's the Muslim psychologist whom I work with. You know, when we perform, people think, oh, they're here performing. That's the fun part. No, the fun part is dinner.
Yeah.
Because we miss each other. But I've been doing this since 2002, actually. In 2001, the end of 2001, I hired a publicist in LA. I figured it's worth an investment. She'll raise my visibility, which is what they're supposed to do. She was not particularly effective. I mean, basically, she got me into the witness protection program. But she said, you know, Bob, I got this great idea. Why don't you do a show with a Muslim comedian? And I said, do you have any other ideas? Because it wasn't the idea of working with a Muslim, it was working with another comedian, because they tend to be neurotic.
Yeah.
But she found a guy, and we ended up swapping videotapes across the country, liked what we saw. We tried it out, and he and I did about 500 shows, and then he got into movies and TV, and so I transitioned to, I work with a number of Muslim comics, all very good comedians. And we had fun, you know, when we talk across the country. And I called him one day and said, what's new in LA, where he lived? He said, well, I saw Justin Timberlake in Starbucks. What's new in Vermont? I said, a moose crossed our driveway.
Diverse in lots of ways, huh?
Right.
Yeah.
But you know, the Laugh and Peace, we call it the Laugh and Peace Tour. And if people go on my website, they'll see some demo video, about a 5 or 7 minute video of the Laugh and Peace Tour. Now, we do a lot of shows in all kinds of venues, everything from the World Bank to the Clinton Presidential Library, to churches, mosques, synagogues. It's wonderful. And we're still doing it. Can't wait for the next show.
Yeah.
But we're going to have to wait because of this coronavirus. So.
Right, absolutely. It's so important for people to see people from individuals, especially leaders, clergy from all faiths, not only interacting with one another, with laughing with one another. My good friend, one of my best friends here in Oklahoma City, is an imam, and we've actually had him on the show before, Imad Chauncey. And one of the things that people really enjoy about our presentation when we talk is the fact that we're constantly laughing laughing with one another and laughing at one another. It's just so nice to see. There's something calming about that, and breaks down barriers when we laugh. So,
right. Yeah, it's and what I love is particularly when we do mixed audiences, college audiences. I love seeing Jewish kids realizing that Muslims are very funny, and the opposite. Christians, of course, are not funny. That's another story.
Oh,
I do a lecture on the spirituality of laughter, and I always explain that Christians are not funny. I went to Princeton Theological Seminary and did a Doctor of Ministry degree. And the first class, there were 8 ministers, 2 priests, and a rabbi, and we would meet once a week. And the director of the program was a man named the Reverend Dr. J. Randall Nichols. He's a tall man with a deep voice, a marvelous teacher. And he began by saying Presbyterians are not funny. Well, he's the instructor. We believe whatever he says.
Right.
You know, okay. And then 20 minutes into the class, one of my colleagues was presenting a case study about a really difficult woman in his congregation. And he finished, and then the Reverend Dr. J. Randall Nichols looked at the class and said, yes, she's the kind of person that you want to kill her and then tell God she died.
We've never known anyone like that, Mitch.
No, we've never known a single person like that at all.
Yeah, so of course, you know, I can't resist being a comedian. I had to pipe up. I mean, it was my first day in class. I'm kind of nervous, but I had to tell the story of the member of my congregation, whom I called, not in front of him, but I called him the king of constructive criticism, because he never missed an opportunity to tell me how I could give better sermons or conduct services or organize. Never failed. One time he came up, gave me his latest advice, and I looked at him and I said, you know, Phil, I wish I had 10 congregants just like you. He said, really? Why do you say that? I said, because I have 20 congregants just like you.
Wow. How do you take it?
Not a true story, but
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
although there is a true story. One guy, in Buffalo, we had two buildings: the downtown building where the synagogue sanctuary is located, and a suburban religious school, a suburban building we call it. And one day, one of the, in conversation, the guy smiles and says, Bob, I pay your salary. I said, no, Ed, actually, your congregational dues are dedicated to buying toilet paper in the suburban building.
We just designated it right over.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, well, Rabbi Alper, obviously, you mentioned the pandemic earlier in the interview, and we are in the middle of some very perilous times. It seems like every day we open up the paper and the case count continues to escalate, the death count continues to grow. And, as serious as this moment is, and as people find themselves frightened and afraid, we understand that comedy has historically been a tool to help us cope, to help us interpret, and also an outlet for us to find peace. Can you just talk about the importance of laughter and comedy for our audience who are really kind of feeling afraid in these dark days?
Sure. Appropriate laughter, and that's the key.
Yeah.
Because all kinds of laughter at the expense of other people, laughter that makes you feel dirty afterwards, that all kinds of negative, but appropriate laughter has so many ramifications. And somebody once called it internal aerobics. It shakes you up. It excites the endorphins. It's healing, both spiritually and also physically healing. And Norman Cousins checked himself out of the hospital when he was very ill and into a hotel and watched Marx Brothers movies. And he said a few minutes of laughter and he was able to sleep for an hour and a half.
Wow.
It helps. So my job is to help people laugh. And they know I take them serious. In a funeral, I often use, when appropriate, a little bit of humor. Yeah. And then we get really serious. And in a sermon, I'll use a little bit of humor and then get serious. So it's not all stand-up comedy. But when I'm making people laugh, it's raising their spirits. It's a way to cope. Right. One of the things that I'm doing is I've developed an email that I'm sending out every day called Quick Laugh, singular, Quick Laugh.
Quick Laugh.
In it, and in it I have one clip of my act. I've got 80 stored away, so I'm going to be doing this for a long time. It doesn't take a lot of time. A lot of stuff you get, it's funny, but you have to watch for 5 minutes until you get the punchline. Right. Mine, like the one that's out recently, I'm just looking at the camera. I'm doing stand-up. It was taped during a show, and the whole joke goes, they say people and their dogs, they begin to look alike, act alike, a little reciprocity goes on. For example, in our house, my dog gives me kisses, and my wife turns around 3 times before she sits. So people can open the link, they'll see that, and that's the end. That's all they'll see. And then tomorrow, they'll see, like this is one I did a couple of days ago, they'll see me saying, we follow Jewish tradition in our family. We named our son after my grandfather. We called him Grandpa. Mm-hmm. And it's nice. We found out years ago we were able to get a student loan for him. Uh-huh. We loaned him to a family in Iowa.
So how do we sign up to get these quick laughs?
The best way is to send me an email, because I haven't figured out another way. I don't have it on my website yet. Mm-hmm. But if people send to just bob@bobalper.com and include their email address and the email address of anyone they want, I'll add them right now. It's bob@bobalper.com. Mm-hmm. By the way, people think our name is Alpert.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it used to be Alpert, but we dropped the T at a party in Boston. So,
Love it. Love it.
So, but if they send an email to anytime, bob@bobalpert.com, I'll put them on the list, and every day, probably 10 o'clock in the morning, they will get a quick video joke.
Right.
And on that link, they can forward it to friends, and they can subscribe themselves if they haven't subscribed. I'm thrilled with this. It's been out. It's 3 days now, and I'm thrilled with the response, with people thanking me for doing this, because it's tough time, and this is one way. This is one way they can get through a day.
Absolutely. Well, so at Good Faith Media, our motto is "There's more to tell," and we sort of fancy ourselves a conduit to help people who have stories to tell. And so we like to ask the folks that we interview what their more to tell is.
Well, I think it's my understanding of comedy goes to a line from Maya Angelou. She says, "People forget what you say, and they forget what you do, but they never forget how you make them feel." Mm-hmm. And if you can make somebody laugh, you make them feel good. Mm-hmm. And I want to leave you with this, the most wonderful moment of this 30-year career took place about 10 years ago. I was doing a show, and after the show, a woman who I knew was dying of cancer came up to me. And she looked at me, she said, she said, for an hour and a half, I forgot I was sick.
Wow.
I'll leave you with that.
Wow. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Rabbi Bob Alper from East Dorset, Vermont. Rabbi, it was a delight to have you. Make certain you visit Rabbi Alper's website at bobalper.com. You can buy DVDs, CDs, and books there at the website and watch some of his videos. It has been a joy, my friend.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.